Let's get the show on the road.
Oh, see what he did there. See what he did there.
Hello, you are listening to Off Radar, It's a Movie podcast. I'm James Smith, a professional film and video editor.
I'm James Eatock, a freelance writer and illustrator specialising in 1980s cartoons.
And I'm Neil Brock, aka Nige, the man with two names, former film journalist and currently working in the games industry.
Each week, one of us picks a movie that all three of us either haven't seen in many years or in some cases haven't seen at all.
We each watch the chosen movie, return to the microphone and let you all know exactly what we thought of it.
I'd never really had any interest in watching it and I was proved absolutely right.
I think it's amazing. I really, really love this film.
The film's still a pile of steaming dog shit.
If you fancy joining in and suggesting a movie for us to watch, why not tweet us at Off Radar Podcast
or email us on offradarpod@gmail.com.
If you like what you hear, please subscribe, share, and by all means, leave a review.
For now, strap in, turn the volume up, and let's go Off Radar. Ready?
Never.
Hello, and welcome back to Off Radar. I'm Jay Smith, and joined by James Eatock.
Hello.
And I wonder what he's going to do this time. And Neil Brock.
Welcome to the show, everyone. Come on down.
Oh, Christ, my ears.
Yeah, and today we are talking about a film that came out in 1982 called The King of Comedy. This is a little bit of our kind of double header, I guess, as last time.
Last time on Off Radar
we did Joker. This week we are doing the second instalment, if you like, because a friend from your work recommended Joker and King of Comedy as a box set, basically, for us to do, didn't he, Nige?
Yeah.
That was almost like Nige was reading his phone.
Yeah, I'm here, everyone.
What's the football scores? Yeah.
I was just looking something up. Yeah, a guy called Zachary White, who I did not reach out to because he didn't ask me to regarding his review for these films.
I don't know if he actually listens to the podcast, but
he's listened to some, but he finds you guys like really grating. So
yeah.
Stop listening.
Okay. Well, Zachary recommended this and the Joker for us to do, or Joker for us to do. Came out in 1982. Had we seen this film before we did it for the pod? I imagine we all had. Eatock, give us a...
I saw it back in...
89 in Canada?
No, 2003. No. 2003.
Wow.
My friend had it on DVD and she was like, hey, do you fancy watching King of Comedy? I was like... All right. I knew nothing about the film, but I was like, Scorsese. Yeah. I know Scorsese does good films from time to time. I didn't realise he'd eventually become one of my favourite directors of all time. And yeah, I was like, I like Bobby De Niro. He's always good. He's always good in a movie. But yeah, the title just didn't suggest anything to me. I was like, King of Comedy. What is this? Is this a comedy? I didn't realise it was a deep analysis of the human psyche. But yeah, saw it 2003. Happy anniversary.
Nige, seen this one before, obviously?
Yeah, I had. Basically, when I was younger, like during my college days, so Saved by the Nige, the college years, I used to go around to Mate's house.
A series on.
I know. I'm looking forward to watching it myself. Went round my friend's house, Tom Clark, and he had so many VHS. I was a bit like, oh my god, I want to be like this guy and have so many videos. And it was wall to wall videos. He had loads of those little shelves packed with them, and had all the classics. And one of them that was on his shelf was The King of Comedy, and I think I ended up borrowing it off him. So it must have been, I don't know, late 90s maybe, early noughties that I first watched this film. Borrowed it, watched it, gave it back, and I don't think I'd seen it since.
Oh wow.
So yeah, it'd been quite a long time before it got mentioned for this pod that I'd last watched this film. So there you go.
A goodly while, Nige.
Nice. I think
because Nige didn't give a hint of what he thinks about it.
No, neither did you, to be fair.
We're getting better. We're only nearly 100 episodes in. We're actually getting better at not showing.
I first saw it and really liked it.
I liked the film.
I think, it's hard not to say that sometimes. Yeah, I was similar to you actually, Nige. I went through a stage when I was getting into film, probably my most at 17, 18, where I went through all the classic stage, and it was probably around the time I bought and watched on VHS Raging Bull, basically all those kind of Scorsese films that are around this time, and that was The King of Comedy was just one that I thought, I'll buy that on VHS and give it a go.
Give it a whirl.
I'll give it a whirl. So I did. I bought it and gave it a whirl, and then I've got it on DVD as well from some years later when I kind of rebought all those classics. Excuse me. But yeah, as
don't get all emotional, so it's fine.
Oh God, as Etok mentioned, directed by Martin Scorsese, written by Paul D. Zimmerman. Little fact: he wrote 52 episodes of Sesame Street.
Really?
That's
a great fact, Smith.
So
Nige, I think you've just been usurped.
There you go.
That might be my favourite piece of trivia of all time.
Smithy's trivia time.
Trivia time.
And as you say, starring Bobby De Niro. Now, first up, I want you guys, don't look, to guess, if you can, every film that De Niro and Scorsese have worked on together. There's quite a few. I've got them in front of me. Can you name them all, starting in 1973?
What, Taxi
Driver, Raging Bull.
Yeah.
Like the two obvious ones. Then you've got like
Goodfellas Casino.
Yeah, I was going to say Goodfellas Casino. Once Upon a Time in America.
No, that was.
wasn't that?
It was.
Of course it was. Shit. I'm going to struggle with this then. Christ Almighty. Well, obviously the new one as well. The Irishman.
Yeah.
Taxi Driver, Raging Bull, and then we're missing like the 80s.
Well, the King of Comedy, obviously.
Obviously, the King of Comedy. Yeah.
Missing a chunk. Then we go Goodfellas, Casino.
There's one very obvious one that comes first, basically, before Taxi Driver.
Before Taxi Driver,
which you'll know.
Robert De Niro.
Oh, Cape Fear, was that Scorsese?
Well, Cape Fear is one of them. 1991. That was.
Was that Scorsese? Cape Fear.
Yeah.
Because
it's a remake, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was a remake. I did not know it was Scorsese.
You're nearly there.
What's the one with DiCaprio? Is he in that? The blooming.
Yeah.
Flower Moon thing.
Yeah. Yes. Killers of the Flower Moon. Or
Killers of the Flower Moon. So that's that.
I feel
I'll give you the remaining two. So 77 is New York, New York.
No, wouldn't have never got that.
Never heard of that.
I haven't heard of that, and I haven't heard of the other one. It's called The Audition as well, which it's got De Niro, DiCaprio, Brad Pitt in.
Wow.
I've never even heard of that.
Yeah, that snuck under the radar, didn't it?
Oh, wait a minute. That's why it's a short film, but it's got all of them in. Wow. That's crazy, isn't it? That they've done... Anyway, that's why we wouldn't have heard of it.
There we go.
So there you go. They've worked together quite a lot. Also in this film, Jerry Lewis, Sandra Bernhard, and Diahnne Abbott, who was De Niro's first wife. Another bit of Smith trivia that I never knew.
Can I point out someone I spotted? I don't know if this has been confirmed.
David Schwimmer.
No. So I noticed there's a like.
Oh, don't give away all my trivia, for God's sake.
No,
Go on.
It's not the Clash, and I'm not talking about the Clash.
Oh,
in the crowd.
you dick!
This was the woman, like the actress. First one of the most famous.
Oh yeah.
The sister in Scarface, the lead woman in The Abyss, Mary Elizabeth something.
Mary Mascara.
Yes,
yeah, she's one of the part of the crowd, isn't she?
You see her for 5 seconds because it's that unmistakable. Yeah. She's a very pretty woman, but that unmistakable hair, and I was just like, I had to go back and I was like, is that her? But I didn't.
I didn't notice that. That's good. In the crowd at the beginning, in the kind of the craziness.
I think it's the first bit. No, not that bit. It's I think it's during the Clash where you see the Clash in the crowd. It's a bit before then. But I saw him and he was talking. I was like, I swear to God, that's her in the background. So
wow.
Unless it was in the initial crowd scene. Anyway, yeah, she pops up. But yeah, Jerry Lewis.
There you go.
Yeah,
Jerry Lewis. But there you go. Yeah. The King of Comedy. Trivia done. What do we think? So, Etok, I asked you to do a little synopsis.
A little synopsis?
Little King of Comedy. Hopefully it'll be...
I'll do a Nige one.
Oh, God.
Ruh-roh. I should do this in the style of Sesame Street. Okay. In the world of late-night talk shows, legendary comedian Jerry Langford is the king of them all. Making an appearance on his show guarantees that one will be seen by tens of millions of viewers. Thus, for a hopeful comedian like Rupert Pupkin, appearing on Jerry's show would be the best way for him to make his breakthrough. Although an impromptu one-on-one meeting with Jerry results in Rupert being offered some measured and patient career advice, ever the fantasist, Pupkin persists in trying to get a spot on Jerry's show. At the point of desperation, Rupert, aided by his somewhat equally unhinged friend Marcia, formulate a plan to gain Jerry's undivided attention. ...
Dot,
That
dot, dot.
That was good.
And what I'm thinking as I'm sitting here now, well, maybe this is my big break. This is my big chance. You know what I mean?
You don't just walk onto a network show without experience. Now, I know it's an old hackneyed expression, but it happens to be the truth. You've got to start at the bottom.
I know. That's where I am, at the bottom.
That's a perfect place to start.
So will you please give your warmest greetings to the newest king of comedy, Rupert Pupkin.
His name is Rupert Pupkin. He lives in a world of make-believe.
Oh, Jerry, I love this guy. Always coming up with these great lines. I love him.
Nobody can remember his name.
Mr. Pipkin. Mr. Pupnik.
Mr. Puffer.
Rupert.
Pupkin, Pupkin.
But by 11:30 tonight, the whole world will know that Rupert Pupkin is the new king of comedy.
The king of comedy.
King of comedy.
We open, and like you say, Jerry Langford show, and it's like... It's almost like we're watching the show, isn't it?
I love the fact they're able to do that.
It's like all kind of tatty and almost like watching a VHS.
Well, it's a TV broadcast. It's an American TV broadcast from the 80s, 480 lines across the screen. Not as good as PAL, obviously, with a 576. So yeah, PAL versus NTSC.
Slightly lower aspect ratio.
The UK and PAL always wins.
Yeah. And those 29.97 frames.
Never helps.
Never helps. But then after the show, we get this the kind of pandemonium outside that. You know, Jerry Langford. I'm going to keep calling him Lewis.
It's hard not to call him Jerry Lewis
because he is basically playing a version of like himself, I guess. But
to a degree, like obviously on screen, this Jerry Lewis. I'm guessing at this point in his career he was more known for from what I recall, like his big American telethon work, where he would, be like, stand there and say like, hey, everybody call in and donate money to charities and stuff like that.
I think it depended how old you were and what sort of generation you grew up with.
What I'm saying is during that, like, I'm guessing 70s to 80s and beyond, that was his career. Prior to that, obviously, he was he would team up with the crooner. Oh God, Dean Martin.
Dean Martin. Yeah, they did a bunch of films
with these double acts. And see, I knew. I grew up with like my parents were big fans of those American comedies, so I was kind of exposed to Jerry Lewis. So I knew of his work and that the Nutty Professor and all that business. And like, people are going to groan at this comparison, but very much. Kind of that Jim Carrey before Jim Carrey on screen. Yeah, but you know what I mean.
Oh, there he goes again.
There he goes. But you know what I mean? That thing of just that over the top presence on screen to the point of like, does he ever turn it off? Like Robin Williams. Does Robin Williams ever turn it off? And
right.
It's funny they offered this. No, they didn't.
Yeah, but so I would say like him playing this role is really fascinating to me because he's not playing like. The crazy Jerry Lewis. He's almost playing the real life version of himself, which is quite, from interviews, is quite a serious fellow. If you ever seen...
and that's the way he's presented as well, isn't he? Because he is seen as like the star, but he doesn't really like the stardom. So when we're kind of jumping a bit, but when he's walking down the street, for instance, he doesn't want to sign autographs or take calls from.
It's really interesting, like that bit. Like when they originally got approached about doing the film, he actually suggested that his character's called Jerry, and what they did, they just walked him around
down the street.
Really? And so nearly all those interactions, there's one particularly harsh one where she says, "Oh, I hope you get cancer," like, which is apparently based on a true life thing that happened to him, and he actually apparently directed that scene as well. Thrown all my trivia in early, but they basically just filmed like real life reactions to people being like, "Hey, Jerry, Jerry," kind of thing. So like the builders and like who are on the construction site, like taxi drivers, all that kind of stuff. All ad-libbed, all real life, people wanting to speak to Jerry. But I think my experience with Jerry like contrasts so differently to Etox. I was like, is that Jerry Lee Lewis? Like I'd literally never heard of him.
Wow.
Which is crazy because again, like you say, there's a bunch of films like The Nutty Professor and so on and so forth that he's well known for. Even before watching it this time, I was still like, Jerry Lewis, who is Jerry Lewis? So I never the first time I watched this all this time, I never got like, oh, it's Jerry Lewis, the famous like American TV show host and comedian and actor, and he was like a jack of sort of many trades, almost like an American Des O'Connor, sort of Bob Monkhouse, I don't know, probably slightly more famous than that in some regards, and certainly more crossover. But yeah, I didn't really have the context for who he was.
Oh, wow.
So really, they could have cast anyone in this role; it would have had the same effect on me. But yeah, now sort of looking into this film a bit more, appreciate that. Yeah, he's an absolute household name in the States, massively famous. Part, like you said, friends with Dean Martin. Part of that scene, and someone who
was kind of like an external member of the Rat Pack.
Exactly, but had to deal with the fame and the pressures that come with it for a good chunk of his career, which is why they obviously thought he was a good candidate for this role with his previous acting experience as well.
I think the interesting thing is, though, like, even if you don't necessarily know who he is, I mean, I kind of knew who he was, but I wouldn't say I've seen much of his work. It still works as that role. But anyway, sorry, just looping back slightly.
Of course.
So we get this pandemonium outside, and obviously we got De Niro, who's basically dressed exactly like Jerry Langfield, and the opening of this thing is him trying to get into a car, and you get this kind of like unsettling, kind of crazy stardom that you would get with like the Beatles or something, like, you know, like around, well, the Beatles were obviously a lot earlier, but, you know, like that for a TV star, which is quite like surprising. But yeah, De Niro kind of almost like
becomes his minder, doesn't he? It's like steps in.
I love this introduction because firstly it's established that they're not only people that just are fans of his, but they're autograph hunters. There's like a group of them that clearly go around just hunting autograph because they all recognise one another, as in the autograph hunters are like, hey Rupert,
it's like a little community, isn't it?
But the thing is, and this is like a really wonderful early insight into how Rupert perceives himself, is that he says to like one of the autograph hunters, he's like, this isn't my whole life, but we know it is. He autograph hunts, he wants desperately for fame. And so he's already convinced from the first line in this film that he's someone special. And I thought that was a really lovely little touch. It's like he comes in and his first line is, it's not my whole life. He's above all these other plebeians trying to get an autograph. And then obviously unrequested acts, as you say, as kind of Jerry's minder, gets him into the car and then jumps in himself after obviously there's a brief wonderful altercation with Sandra Bernhard.
Yeah, and Masha, like, as a Craze fan, and you just think, it's some random Craze fan you get out of it. Little do you know that she's more involved in this whole film than you would imagine.
Well, what you just said there, Ito, was really interesting because he feels like he's above everything, and he feels like he's so above her in this film because, you know, she is like of this power dynamic, but you know, like the actual influence that she then goes on to have in this film is, and like the opening title sequence of this film is her hand on the window, and
with him
Jerry Lewis looking out, and it's really well done, and it's literally just the music, which is Ray Charles' Come Shine, Rain or Shine, that song, which comes back, I think, in the film a couple of times, and old school titles like we used to get in films.
It was nice. I was
really fantastic opening to a film. You're like, okay, you know exactly where you are. You're developing Rupert's character instantly, and you're even giving Marsha, who you think, oh, she's just a throwaway character to begin with, like this context very early on in the film.
I guess when you met me, it was just
I was going to say, like, she comes across especially unhinged, like absolutely like batshit crazy in that early scene, and she's kind of, I would say she's got a very specific look to her as well. And like, I personally remember her as an actress or an actor from like being in Roseanne and playing like Nancy and that.
That was the one,
yeah, absolutely. But with him, Rupert Pupkin, you kind of think he's kind of normal, and then normal-ish, I guess, in the car ride, and then when they eventually get to the flat, and you can see how desperate he is, and he keeps sort of calling him back to asking questions, and it kind of goes on and on and on and on, and then when you kind of see into his real world, the fact he lives in like his mum's basement, has got all these cardboard cutouts of the crowd, of like celebrities, of everyone. It's like, oh my god, who is this guy? And where, if you would look at on the street and compare those two characters, like she's the unhinged one, he's quite normal, but lo and behold, like she's still unhinged, don't get me wrong, but his character, obviously there's a whole other layer there as well.
Exactly. And very early on you get that lunch interaction where you've got De Niro and Jerry Lewis having lunch, and at first I was like, oh wow, he's managed to get lunch with him, because it's done like reality. This is something we obviously talked about in The Joker, but it's intercut with him having that conversation at home with the cardboard cutouts, I think, or maybe not.
No, he's not even cardboard cutouts.
He's just having the conversation on his own, isn't he? And doing this mad laughter. But it's the editing of this, and this is like so Scorsese, really, like his influence straight away between the two, the reality and the fantasy.
Well, again, what I love about the fantasy is that the fantasy bleeds into, again, it reveals more about his character. In the fantasy, Jerry's the one begging him for help. He's like, look, Jerry, I'll do, you invite me here for lunch, and I do. And it's, De Niro plays it so well, because his character stays the same throughout the whole movie. And I don't mean that as in there's no progression.
It's true.
But even in the fantasy and the reality, it's he maintains this personality of this guy who, I mean, the end of the film is somewhat ironic, but this guy who believes he's destined for stardom, but everyone around him says, like, no, you're just like some bloke who you can't get, you haven't got a good joke in you, etc., etc.
Just a pleb.
Listen, I really wish you would think about it again, okay?
You're starting again. You're starting up again.
Hey, it's not that big a deal to think. I'm asking you to just think.
I'm thinking. You're always telling me to think. That's all I do is think day and night about it. How can I not think about it? I mean, I've been sitting here at lunch with you, which I knew is the reason you invited me in the first place, and all I'm sitting here and eating for is to get guilty with you, right?
I'm asking you to take over the show for 6 weeks. I mean, what's 6 weeks?
I'll give you anything, but don't ask me to do 6 weeks. I can't take over the show for 6 weeks. I can't even take over my own life for 6 weeks. And you're asking me to do something that's impossible. It's impossible. Don't you understand? What?
What are you doing down there so late?
It's impossible. I'm trying to tell you that. What do you want? You want the tears to come out of my eyes?
Well, Scorsese said, like, he wanted there to be no difference between fantasy and reality in the film.
Oh, there you go.
Right. And like we've obviously mentioned the fact this has got that heavy influence on Joker, which was made many years later.
Yeah.
And again, very, very similar thing. And like we kind of turned around and said, oh yeah, it's kind of like Fight Club-esque, but really it's more the King of Comedy. Like it was one of the sort of an early film, at least, that kind of used that blurring of the lines between fantasy and reality. And I think there is like fan theory around it as well, in terms of like the outfits he wears. So quite often in the sort of fancy bits, he's wearing like a monochromed suit, whilst in reality he's wearing like a spotted suit with a little, what's it called, like little pocket square and stuff like that.
Oh, right.
But I don't know whether Scorsese ever actually said, oh, this bit is reality, this bit is fantasy. Obviously there's some bits where it's very obvious, i.e. that meal, but the ending I'd say is quite ambiguous.
I did notice how, like, the emphasis on red in this film. So he wears a red tie, there's red bars, the Art Deco kind of setting all pipes back to, obviously a comedy show, right? You've often got the red curtains and stuff. So even, like the red jumper they dress Lewis in later, there's always these little kind of red bits dotted around the film, which I thought was really clever, because it not only does it give it that kind of Art Deco feel, but it reminds you of his purpose in this film, to basically wants to be a star. One thing I was also just going to say really quickly, you said he lives with his mum. Again, like Joker, right? Like really similar. But what I really love about this is it's a bit like Tom and Jerry. You never see the mum. You just hear the screaming at her. Like,
do you know who that mum is as well?
No, go on.
I'm going to guess like it's going to be Scorsese's mother.
Yeah, like in Goodfellas, it's his
in Goodfellas.
mom.
It's like whenever there's like an old lady or an elderly lady, Scorsese always puts his mum in. Bless him. But it's like, for some reason, I just remember hearing the voice and just thinking, it's going to be his mum. Because obviously, I didn't look at the credits, but obviously if you cast someone in that role, then they have to show up at some point. Because obviously his mum's in Raging Bull Goodfellas.
Yeah, Goodfellas.
I think she might be
really? Yeah. Wow.
She's at the dinner table, like when they come over. She's kind of there.
Okay. Man,
but
not thought about.
So he goes on the date with Rita, which I thought was really interesting. So he goes and he hooks up like Rita at the bar and starts chatting to her. And again, I just love the way his character is written. This kind of this confidence, this absolute self-involvement. So they're on this date, and he brings out his autograph book, and he says, "Oh, this one's very special." And she's like, "Oh," and he's like, "Marilyn Monroe," and he doesn't. I think she says like, "That's my favorite" or something. And what I love about it is he doesn't ask her why she likes Marilyn Monroe. He just talks at her about Marilyn Monroe. And I was like, that's a really lovely touch, because again, it just shows you how kind of he's just in his own train of thought. It's just all about how he has, I wrote down in my notes, like delusions of grandeur. He's just like, I should be a star, and everyone should. But he goes after the dinner date with Rita. He goes back to his house. That's where you see the talk show setup, where it's got Liza Minnelli cut out, Jerry cut out, and the set, and it's just like,
it looks amazing, doesn't it?
But then it gets
so
to that iconic shot, which I think is amazing, where he stands up in front of the blown up photo of the crowd. Yeah. Which I don't know if it was a movie poster, but that should have been the movie poster.
I think it's definitely the DVD. Cover,
because it's incredible. It really is.
Yeah, it is. It's really.
There's a few different nice posters for this. One of the one on IMDb is like 2 playing cards, and you've got the King of Comedy, like Jerry Lewis, and then you've got sort of De Niro's character as the Joker, obviously, as well.
Nice.
And it's no laughing matter is the tagline. so yeah. But yeah, it's kind of interesting. You were saying about how like he's so like narrow focused, and I don't want to jump right to the end, but essentially when he finally gets an opportunity to kind of talk about himself, there's a reason why he's like this. Like when he grows up, he comes from like a horrible upbringing where he's like horribly bullied and just never really given a chance to shine or do anything. And people have kind of always laughed at his misfortune, and obviously that's kind of what his act almost ends up being. But yeah, it's completely understandable. He comes from the sheltered experience that he's just desperate to be someone who's kind of taken seriously, and like desperate to be the one rather than the none that he's been for so much of his life. And part of that ties into his relationship with Rita, in the sense like they were kind of friends at school, but he was always a bit of a loser. She remembers him, and it's probably nicer to him than you would expect. That almost seems a little bit fantasy-ish, but yeah, he goes on a date, but he's just not great at it. So
I want to talk about the first of those the most famous, as Nige will talk about in his trivia of the or he probably won't now, of the famous like New York street scenes, because this film, I know I'm always going to run back to Ghostbusters, but one thing about Ghostbusters, it's such a New York film. And like Taxi Driver, such a New York film.
many of Scorsese films,
of course, but this is just, it's so wonderfully, you can never capture that realism, and they do it so good. Like I don't think we've got to it yet, but it's one of my the scene is just one of the funniest scenes. Is aside from that interaction between Sandra, Bernhard, Marsha and Rupert, is when Marsha's chasing or stalking after
that's
Jerry
amazing.
But what always makes me laugh about it is when he runs, that's old Jerry Lewis. It's like the comedy running of Jerry Lewis, where it's
Rodney Dangerfield running.
Well, it's like a low center of gravity, and it's like the arms don't move right, and the way she chases him, and it's so well done.
It is. Again, the way they do that as well is through this tension, but there's very little music in this film, which we talk about music being so significant in many films, and that's why it has a very old school this film, because it feels very raw. And you talk about New York, you hear just like the traffic and the people, exactly, and that is the atmosphere. That is almost like the soundtrack of his life. So when that contrast to the crowd and the kind of like you say, the grandiose kind of being on stage, it has that impact that bit more when we get to those moments later on. But yeah,
there's another great fantasy he has prior to the wedding one, where he's trying to get into Jerry's office, so he keeps going to like have a meeting.
I really
with
enjoyed
him.
These getting into the office scenes.
They're great. They're great interactions,
especially with that receptionist who's just
the
like,
receptionist
oh my god,
yeah,
what is
the
this
receptionist and then the personal assistant as well. Yeah,
she's like, okay, you can. And then you can talk. Is Jerry here?
The security guard's great as well. They're all like really good characters, like defined even in their very tiny little appearances. But there's one moment where I think he's either been kicked out of the office or he's waiting to hopefully get to see Jerry, and we all know he's never going to get to see him. And Rupert's sitting there, and he has a fancy where basically Jerry's listened to his tape, and he's like, "You've got it. I don't know. Like, there's no way of getting rid of this now. You have the talent. You can't get rid of it, even if you wanted to." And it's this whole thing. He's like, "You need to tell me how you do it." And it's this, and like again, Rupert is just so confident in himself that he's like sitting back in the chair, and Jerry's up, kind of all excited, going, "You know, you're going to go places," and all. It's that wonderful, just. The detachment from reality. There you go. That's a good way of putting it. Is just, and I'll get to the wedding because it was actually the next thing in my notes, which made it was probably close in terms of the continuity. But he has this wedding fantasy where he's on Jerry's talk show, and Jerry brings out like an old, I think a teacher from Rupert's school. Rupert's like, you're my old teacher. And he goes, well, I'm actually an ordained minister. Yeah. And it's like, how about, like, and Jerry's like, how about we have a wedding on the show or something? And Rupert's like, what? Oh my, and it's all of such talk show hamming it up. He's just like, oh, Jerry, I can't believe it. They're all hugging. And the ordained speech is like the minister stands there, and it's great because instead of saying like, "Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today to," it's basically like saying, "We were all wrong about you, Rupert. You're great. Please accept our forgiveness for ever doubting you." It's not about her or the beauty of marriage or anything. It's just how great Rupert is, and I love that.
Before the entire nation, we'd like to apologize to you personally and to beg your forgiveness for all the things we did to you.
But then they go to Jerry's home, which I think is an amazing scene.
Yeah, well, that scene as well. Like, the scene was pretty much mainly improvised. So when they first get there, there's like the Kim Chan who plays like his I don't know, butler, doorman, whatever you want to call it, the person who lives there. Like, there's this really weird bit where he like really struggles to open the door to let Jerry in, and he just like he couldn't actually do it. So when Jerry comes in, he's like improvises reaction, just like starts kicking off at him. And apparently, like, obviously we all know about De Niro being like an absolute like method actor, whilst Jerry Lewis obviously came from a lot more, I guess, relaxed acting stock.
Yeah.
To try and get Jerry just really angry, because obviously when he comes back and finds these like two random people, one of which he's met and doesn't particularly like, and the other one's just a random who's shown up in his house, he's furious. Yeah. So basically De Niro used anti-Semitic remarks just to piss him off, like off camera, to the point like he was shocked and appalled because he'd never worked with a method actor. But like, let's be honest, it's a really credible, angry performance from Jerry Lewis, and he just nails it. But the whole thing, it's like my worst nightmare. It's so unbelievably awkward. Could you imagine?
She's great in it, Rita, because she goes from being really excited to be in Jerry Langford's house to realizing that something's not quite right, to like confusion, then she's visibly upset, and then she's embarrassed,
and then she doesn't want to. Yeah, exactly. She kind of goes through everything because she believes him for.
Yeah, she's like, oh, we're here as guests,
and then all of a sudden she's like, no, Jerry, I didn't really know about this type thing, and it is.
But he doesn't care, does he? Like Jerry, he's just like, it's just, I don't care you. I get the fuck out of my house.
And when she collects her bag, she swipes something, I think, as well. She grabs something from the table.
Rupert is just so didisillusioned, though, that he still believes that, you know, like, he's got a chance, even
no, not disillusioned, disconnected. Like, he's not. He's completely still in the fantasy
in his own world. Yeah. But yeah, it's really well done. I know what you mean about the awkwardness. It's almost like, oh my god, he's going to get found in the house to begin with, and then when Jerry Lewis comes down, you're like, oh, and it does, as an audience member, it makes you feel almost like The Office, or that kind of level of awkwardness. It's like,
but like in the brass balls, to walk into his house, like, let's have a drink, kind of thing. And when Jerry's not there, at first you're like, oh my god, maybe he's going to get away with it. Maybe it's not going to be that bad. They have to like call him up on the golf course and get him to come back, and it's just Oh, it's absolutely horrific, that scene, but in a good way, I would say.
Do you fancy sending us a film to review, or letting us know your thoughts on a film that we have discussed? All of your comments will be read out in our end of season leaderboard episode. Email us on offradarpod@gmail.com, tweet us at offradarpodcast, message us on Facebook. All links and info in the description down below.
Do it! Do it!
I mean, obviously we get to a point in this film where the one thing we haven't really spoke about too much is Rupert and Marsha, is it? They kind of develop this weird kind of companionship because they, in a weird way, have the same...
Well, they've always had it prior to the movie. That's the beauty of it. It's like these two are kind of two oddballs that are clearly somewhat unhinged.
But she displays her unhingedness in a totally different way to him. He's quite controlled, and she absolutely adores him and loves him, and that obviously accumulates with them kidnapping him. And it's funny because I think these are some of the funniest moments in the film, but also some of the most hard to watch at the same time. Because
definitely,
they've got massive sunglasses and silly hats on when they as if they're going to disguise themselves. But it's like it's irrelevant, that whole thing. And then when they actually do have him kidnapped, they do all this like Love Actually thing with the cards, like when he's on the phone, but they're upside down. So it's actually really, really funny. It's hilarious. It's really well done.
The cue cards are great because as Jerry's supposed to be reading them to one of his guys on the phone,
like he would do on
with a gun pointed at his head as well.
With a gun pointed at his head, and he's
but he doesn't know that.
No,
and he's getting the cue card. Well, the cue cards are like upside down, round the wrong way, in the wrong order, and it's really well done, that scene. I think even I didn't go back and check, but I'm sure when Rupert first gets out the car to abduct him, he drops the gun because you see him get out of the car and then he scrambles something on the floor and then he gets up to him and he's like,
but they're klutz. They're completely klutz. They're just fools. They have no idea what they're doing. But Jerry's got a gun pointed at him, so he has to believe everything they say. And it's bizarre because they take her back to what is her apartment, and it's amazing. Like she must be absolutely loaded. Maybe she's just like a socialite who's desperate for.
Well, no, I think earlier in there's one bit in the film when they're walking down the street, one of their big arguments. I think this might be during the clash scene where Rupert is saying to her, I've given you, all these things over the years. And he goes, and I live in a small apartment. And he goes, and you live in an upscale kind of apartment in New York or whatever. And I'm sure there's a reference to like parents' money or something like that.
Yeah, that's what I thought it was. Because you wouldn't have a place. It has like a chandelier and a huge like dining room.
You just assume
she comes from good money.
Yeah, you just assume that definitely because, you're right. Like the sense of like detachment from her as well when you've got like the candles and the big like open room and this is the point obviously basically he obviously kind of goes to get on the show. This is the demand, otherwise he's going to kill him. It's almost like a ransom.
It's really well done. It's really well done.
It's really well done because it's almost like quite believable, isn't it?
Well, because he plans it so perfectly. It's for someone so unhinged.
Yeah.
He plans this down to a T, even to the point of like, we're going to film it. I'm not going to give Jerry to you until it's been broadcast. And because they're like, we're going to, the FBI are involved and they're saying to the talk show kind of organize, like the people, the producers and directors of the show, look, we'll film it, but just not air it. And they're like, no, we have to air it because these kidnappers have Jerry. So Rupert goes on the show. It's great. He turns up at the thing, and the first thing he's like, you get this wonderful double narrative story going on. So Jerry is with the FBI, like he's about to appear on the show, and yet he's talking to the FBI and going like, oh, da da da. And they're like,
they kind of read him his rights, don't they? Before he goes on.
And he's like, okay, so where's the? But he's asking questions like, as you would if you were preparing for a talk show, like, oh, can I get some makeup and stuff like that? And at the same time, you've got Jerry Langford tied up to a chair with Sandra Bernhard kind of.
It's comical as well.
It's comical because the way she ties him up is like you would in a cartoon, which doesn't, like it could go too far. It could like become absurd. So you're like, oh, that's just silly. But the way that Scorsese obviously does this is he makes her character so unhinged that actually it's part of her, and it's kind of been leading to that, like the bit where she does the kind of awkward kiss and starts singing the Ray Charles song from the start, which was a really good cool part that I said about in the opening title. She starts singing that, and it's and when she clears the table of everything, as if like
you hear the cat.
Yeah,
do you hear the cat? Yeah.
The cat.
And I was like, I didn't even. Did I see a cat in that part of the film at all? And it's just like, did they just throw that in for the fun of it?
It's odd.
Just like,
yeah.
You're gonna love me like nobody's loved me. Come rain or come shine.
She was cast in this film and she was like a complete unknown, and she was allowed to improvise nearly all her lines because she had no formal acting training, and Scorsese just wanted her to be natural. And so a lot of those scenes, like the kind of bumbling nature of it, they were kind of doing it on the fly, and like it just seems incredible. And like even the film itself, it was originally based on the scriptwriter based it on like Johnny Carson, an article about Johnny Carson sort of dealing with autograph hunters and fanatical people, and Scorsese just wasn't interested in it at all. He's like, I feel no connection to this film, I don't want to make this film. It was only after Michael Cimino passed on it and ended up doing Heaven's Gate, which turned out to be like one of the biggest box office bombs in history, that Scorsese's like personal life as well, he was going through this period where his celebrity status was growing, and De Niro was like, oh, we can make this film really quick, it'll be like a proper New York movie. And Scorsese thought, oh yeah, I can kind of do this, and they brought that kind of rushed New York style to it, as like her acting especially, we mentioned about the kind of raw and rough and ready way of they just shot Jerry Lewis walking down the street and filmed that, and a lot of those kind of street scenes have that, as we've already touched upon, that kind of New York feel. But like her performance in this is just remarkable. Really.
I didn't know she could sing that good. Her singing voice is incredible.
Yeah.
But when she's on his lap and she's like, sometimes I just want to, and she goes crazy. She's like, wouldn't that be great? And it's just so funny.
Yeah.
It's terrifying, but terrifyingly funny as well, because Sandra Bernhard has got like this. She was always known, like you say, I remember her from Roseanne, but she was like this very unique looking woman.
Yeah.
And it's like she's got these, her mouth and her lips were like her kind of very kind of key element, because they're massive. Like she's got this huge mouth and these lips, and just the way she's like, wouldn't that be great? Like screaming in his face, and you're like, oh my God. But again, going back to, you get that thing where she's starting to lose control, because he's like, she kisses him and he's like, can you untie me? Or he says like, take off the tape, and she unties him.
She's that kind of disillusioned that he actually will kind of sleep with her type thing. That she does. She
frees him, but at the same time, you've got Rupert, and he's completely in control of the FBI. It's such a unique situation where they have to do what he says, and
which they do not like one bit.
But what I really liked was he goes out onto the stage, and then it cuts to, I think, back to
you don't see the routine, do you?
No, not initially.
Which I thought was brilliant, because I forgot that, and I thought, okay, well, now we're going to see it, like as we were, but we are reminded that actually when we see the TV show right at the start with Jerry Lewis, we're going to see it from the perspective of the viewer of that time, when he obviously afterwards.
You don't know if it's going to be terrible. Like, there's that inherent risk of like, oh my God, what's this going to be like? Like, obviously with Joker we watched, and it was like he's there, we see him die like in the first stand-up performance, and then when he's there, he's just not funny. Like the crowd don't get him. But here it's like, well, what's going to happen? Because we know Rupert Pupkin isn't funny. Like, at least we're led to believe that.
Well, what I loved as well about this, I hadn't seen this film since 2003. One, I couldn't remember how his routine goes, or even how the movie, I had a rough memory of how the movie ended, but I couldn't remember how his routine went. So obviously when he's like nailing it, I'm just like, oh goodness. But the thing about, I think 2 minutes into it, I'm thinking, this is all a single fucking take. And it's amazing.
Oh, wow. I didn't even clock that.
But I did, because I was watching it thinking, because you become immersed in it. It's like, oh, this is amazing. It's Robert De Niro doing stand-up. And it's like, wait a minute, no, this is him not only remembering his lines, but also having to...
delivering that performance. But also the routine at this stage is the full backstory of his character being his parents being alcoholics and stuff like that.
And it shouldn't be funny. Like, a lot of it is just brutal, and the fact they're laughing is quite harsh. Like,
it's really sad, definitely.
Yeah, he's just kind of saying, oh, yeah, my dad, like, treated me like shit and all this. Oh,
my mother, was it like her alcohol had 2% blood in it and stuff like that?
And like, throwing up was just becoming an adult and things like that.
I guess the thing we haven't mentioned is where we're seeing it as well. We're seeing it in this bar where Rita is, and he's put it on the TV
where she works,
where she works, and he's almost like proving to her, look, I did make it. And even though she doesn't know,
some of the guys in the bar are like, hey, that's that guy on the TV.
Yeah, just drunk. Like, one of those. Martin Scorsese's dad as well.
No way.
Of course.
So there you go. Yeah.
There's a great line and it's like, I think this. I mean, as we'll get to, I think so much of this film is so applicable to modern day celebrity.
Yeah.
Where he says
he goes viral, basically, doesn't he?
Yeah. He says better to be like, he's doing his thing, and he goes, you're going to hear a story. He goes, you know, after this, you're going to hear stories about how I came to be on the show, and that you're going to think it's crazy and stuff. And he goes, the way I look at it, he says, I wrote down, he said, better to be king for a night than a schmuck for a lifetime. And I was like, that is... I heard that line and I was like, bloody hell, that is so relevant today. It's like, I don't care if I made a YouTube video where
I chopped off my arm.
Or I peed on a cat. It's like, it got watched by 40 million people and now I'm known as the cat pee man or whatever. And that's the thing. It's like, sadly, but I will say this, at least then you had to have some... increment of talent to be a celebrity and famous.
Yeah, the door wouldn't even have been open. You can just film yourself.
Now it's like, oh, I did a massive poo and uploaded it to Daily Motion. It's like, oh, you legend. But it's like, now I'm known as a big poo man.
The other thing you sorry, no, you're absolutely right. But the other thing you get, you know, when you get his shot of doing the routine, not once do we see the audience at all, do we? No reaction whatsoever.
Oh, so could it be canned laughter kind of thing?
No, I'm not saying that, but it's just an observation that, you know.
No, I think
was it that common in those days? Maybe. Sorry, go on.
No, not on like, in fact, to kind of tie into both what you're saying. No, I think during those shows, if you go back and look at the old Johnny Carson shows and stuff, like with our favourite comedian Rodney Dangerfield, it was always one shot of the comedian would come from behind the curtain, you'd get them for a single shot, and then they'd go and sit next to and be interviewed by Johnny Carson or David Letterman. It was always like introduction to the comedian does their shot, goes there. You never got reaction shots in the crowd, especially during that time. You may now on like I was going to say Jimmy Somerville. I don't think Jimmy Somerville was doing
Savile. No, you mean Jimmy Savile, yeah.
No, I don't mean Jimmy Savile. It's Jimmy Fallon, that's what I'm trying to think of. But like the modern talk shows, I don't know if... Or James Corden, the most...
They do some... They have more like crowd interaction, don't they? But even then, like, generally they don't show the crowd. They just... No. Only if it's when people are kind of directly in... Because again, that whole like seeing people... like breaking that sort of fourth wall and seeing people even for sitcoms, like... The first time I saw that, I just remember being like, wow, I've never seen that before. And that was probably in like the 90s or noughties. It wasn't proper old school, but yeah.
And then it beautifully cuts to like an end montage. Well, actually, no, one other thing as well I really loved in that final routine. It doesn't show the full routine because it shows most of, like, I'd say probably about 90% of the routine is that one single take. Then it cuts away so we get a few reaction shots. One being, like Smith pointed out, like... Rupert being in the bar, like presenting the TV to Rita. Another one, I think it's his final shot in the movie, is Jerry walking back to... He's like racing back to the strip.
Yeah, because he gets free, and Marsha's charging down the street in her pants.
She's chasing after him in her pants,
which is brilliant.
And he walks past these tellies, and all of these TV screens are showing Jerry's performance, and he just stops, and you get a shot of Jerry's face, and it's almost like there's so much going on there. It's like you almost think like he's thinking, you bastard, to this guy. Yeah. But also there's almost like you think maybe he knows what's coming, as in this guy's gonna, there's a lot there that I think there's to unpack from that one shot, because there's so much going through Jerry's mind. He's been abducted by this guy, he's been taken advantage of, and now this guy is being broadcast to all these people. And like then we eventually cut to the montage, and you get this wonderful it's amazing. It's one of the best like ending montages to a movie. It's like Jerry Pupkin was seen by 87 million.
Langford show, Rupert Pupkin told a gathering of reporters that he still considers Jerry Langford his friend and mentor. He reported that he had been spending his time writing his memoirs, which had been purchased by a leading New York publishing house for in excess of $1 million.
This film was made in what, 80? What do you say, 81, 82?
82, I think it was. Yeah.
82. Yeah.
It's more applicable and truer now, I think, than ever before.
I think so. Yeah, yeah, definitely. That whole thing of going viral and being relevant. You talked about it.
Logan Paul is famous because he went through and filmed some dead bodies in this, and then people were like, "That's horrible. You shouldn't do that." And now he's like one of the highest paid WWE wrestlers. Like, he's very good at it as well, by the way. But it's just like he's got this huge fame, and it's like based on what. And dare I say, not to besmirch the good name of the Kardashians, but Kim Kardashian was famous primarily for being on a sex tape. And that led to her getting her own kind of reality TV series and even more money. And
but the big question is any of this real, or was it just a fantasy?
I think that's what I was going to come around to.
That is the final question, isn't it?
That's the beauty of this film.
Which is great, because you ask yourself that, and who knows, Scorsese might not even know, but he asked the question, which is brilliant. I think one of the things, or the main thing that this film obviously hinges on, as well as basically everything we've said, there's a lot of dialogue in this film, and sometimes I think that can be sometimes a worry, because you're relying on the script writing to be superb, you know? Like, Oppenheimer is a good example. There's so much dialogue, but you're like, fucking hell, there's so much dialogue.
Chew your way through
it. Yeah, but in this case, like, it works, in my opinion, so well, because you've got...
Well, dare I say the movie was, what, an hour and a half?
Yeah, well, I mean, there's that.
It's 139 or something like that.
It's the perfect length.
Perfect length.
But,
109. So,
but I guess one thing we've not really said, which is probably the most obvious thing of all, is how incredible De Niro is in this film. I mean, this is amazing. You know, like, up there for me with, like, almost like Taxi Driver, but in a very different way, because
you don't even think of him as the same actor. I mean, that's what a true actor is. I don't look at him thinking, there's De Niro as a new character. It's
around this time, like, obviously him and Scorsese were producing like some like incredible films, like I mean, Taxi Driver, like his performance in Taxi Driver, even if you don't like the film, is like, and then this film, it
seems so un-De Niro. It's like, he's done what film, and it's about what? You can't...
It's like he was, exactly, this gangster kind of. Well, that's what he became with
gangster
Scorsese.
Tough guy.
Tough guy. But in this, it's so...
He's a dork in this.
Yeah,
he's a dork.
A mustached dork. But like, there's a couple of modern actors who have kind of sort of said this film specifically. Like, Steve Carell is one who said he's a huge fan of the film. He partially based his performance in Foxcatcher on De Niro in this.
Right.
And Carell actually got an Oscar nomination for that, which kind of shows like it works. And Jason Bateman as well, who's sort of pretty well known for like Arrested Development and things like that. He said one of his favourite like all-time acting performances is De Niro in this, and he said it's the perfect example of how to perform at a high level consistently throughout the whole movie, but without ever losing the audience sympathy or dropping the ball by becoming self-aware or congratulatory.
Yeah,
because he's just not, is he? He just kind of just goes through the film, and there's whatever the setback, he's just got that steel mind, determination. This is the path I'm going down, and it's just remarkable.
It is the way he does it as well. He's quick talking, twitchy. He's got this kind of the spontaneous laugh, which obviously in Joker as well. Good comparison, you know, like the Joker. It's like this crazy, like almost like over the top laugh. In this, he has this spontaneous laugh, but it's not to the level of insanity that the, you know, like Joaquin Phoenix and Joker has.
No, of course not.
But yeah, like obviously De Niro coming back in the Joker, I thought was a really nice touch because of all the callbacks to this film. But yeah, no, it's an amazing performance, I think.
Have we said anything bad about this movie?
No. Let's see where we go after our trivia, Nige.
So yeah, in terms of like trivia, Scorsese was actually quite ill before this film was made, and he had like a really bad bout of pneumonia, and it was a real struggle for him to kind of do this. And again, it's a very interesting film in the sense, like, it's kind of that very New York style, and it was shot quite quickly and put together. But apparently, like, him and De Niro kind of fell out a little bit doing this because it was such a high stressed situation, and it kind of added to this as well. Like, the style of directing and De Niro's style meant that a lot of the time when Jerry Lewis was on set, he'd wait like days at a time to actually be used. And at one point, he was just saying like I'm going to get paid for this time, I need to wait, and if he wasn't going to use me, like, just tell me and I'll go and do something else. So there's a little bit of tension on set with this film, and I think one of those things where we kind of look at this film now and it's so critically acclaimed. Like, it cost 19 million to make. It only made 2.5 million back, and it was only in cinemas for 2 weeks. And like, Entertainment Tonight called it like the flop of the year in like the end of, I think, the end of like 1983 or whenever it was. So again, it just goes to show that it wasn't, despite having like so many elements to it that seemed to work so well, even at the time there was a lot of uncertainty about it, really. And with Jerry Lewis as well, like, he kind of envisaged the film a little bit different. Like, I think a few film people absolutely praised his performance, and he was like, why? I'm just playing myself. Like, he was really not downcast about it, but really sort of didn't want to sell it too much. And he even thought that his character should kill Rupert at the end of the film, but Scorsese rejected it. But you also, like, Jerry, when he gets the gun, he doesn't hesitate. He like shoots at her straight away and kind of realizes, oh, no, actually it's a toy gun kind of thing. I think maybe he finds out just before anyway, but even he fires
one shot and he's like poink, and then goes doink doink kind of.
It's funny,
and then slaps her and gives her a slap.
Because we say it's like really De Niro, it's actually Scorsese, this film as well, when you think about a lot of his films being violent and, you know, like gangstery as well. It's very against Scorsese's type.
Well, he said the film was an unsettling experience because of like the embarrassing bitter material of the script, and he said basically him and De Niro didn't work together for like 7 years or however long it was, because he found it especially emotionally so grueling. But he's later kind of said that he thinks it's De Niro's best performance under his direction in this film. So even if it was a challenge, they kind of got there in the end. A few other like little bits of trivia. You mentioned earlier about the Clash being in it. The Clash was one of Scorsese's favourite bands. They play Street Scum as their build in the credits. Liza Minnelli actually filmed a scene. We know she appears as a cardboard cutout, but she was going to be on Jerry Langford's talk show and sing New York, New York, but didn't make the final cut, so got cut out literally into a cardboard cutout instead. You mentioned about Diahnne Abbott and De Niro. It was like De Niro's first wife. They're actually married at the time this film was made as well, which was something I was very shocked to read afterwards because I didn't realise.
No, I didn't.
Jerry Langford's lawyer was actually played by Martin Scorsese's real life lawyer as well. So
that guy,
the big guy, the love, Meryl Streep actually turned down the part of... It's listed as like Masha. I know we've said Marsha quite a bit, and I don't hear it pronounced as Masha, but apparently that's what it says.
Masha.
So.
I'm sure they say Marsha.
Well,
towards the...
all the documentation I've read on the internet, which never lies, suggests it's Masha, but who knows? Johnny Carson was actually offered the role before Lewis, but turned it down. Sinatra, Dean Martin, Sammy Davis Jr., even Orson Welles were all considered for this role, but obviously went to Jerry Lewis. Last couple of bits of trivia. To prepare for the role of Pupkin, De Niro spent time with a real-life superfan, a guy called Vinny Gonzalez, otherwise known as Fat Vinny, who is a superfan of the rock band Kiss and a huge Hollywood autograph seeker. Like, Gonzalez got to meet De Niro whilst trying to get his autograph, and both men actually hit it off and became like good friends. De Niro visited his home. He used him as his inspiration for the character, and he even offered him a job as his personal driver, but Vinny turned him down because Kiss were going on tour again soon and wanted to go. So, and then the last bit of trivia, Scorsese actually said about the screenplay, I thought the movie was just a one-line gag. You won't let me go on the show, so I'll kidnap you and you'll put me on the show, and that's it. That's how simple he thought this film was. So
wow.
So there you go. That's Nige's trivia for you.
Man, good trivia as always. So
not as good as Sesame Street.
Yeah, well, there you go. Dude.
You won the trivia.
So what did we think? Shall I go first on this one?
Yeah, go on, Smith. You lead the way. This
is an interesting one because I, as I said at the start, had it on VHS. I bought it on DVD. And at the time, even when I was 17, 18, I absolutely adored this film when I first saw it. It was like one of those films that influenced me into getting into film and making films, and now I'm a stand-up comedian. Who's laughing now? Oh no, that was joking. But Yeah, I haven't seen it for maybe 15, 20 years or whenever. So I was kind of a little bit nervous about going back and watching it and thinking, you know, is this a bit dated? Is it of that time? Is it of that, you know, is it just a good kind of classic that everybody likes, but maybe it doesn't hold up as well? Luckily I was wrong about thinking that, because I really bloody enjoyed this film. I would put it up there as personally one of my favourite Scorsese films, potentially one of my favourite De Niro films. I feel like we've not said, unless there's going to be a huge twist from Nige, many bad things about this film, and because I can't really think of many. I thought it was, like, we talked about Joker last week, and you know, like, we had quite a lot of criticism about it, especially you guys. I still enjoyed that and gave that an 8. So I'm gonna find it hard to give this anything but higher than that. Like I said, De Niro's performance is outstanding. I forgot how good the supporting cast were, and I think sometimes it's, you know, a little bit unfair that we do that, but you know, it's normally because De Niro's so good, but he ironically doesn't necessarily always steal the show in this film. I feel like, you know, the lady, I can't remember her name now, who plays Marsha or whatever,
Sandra Bernhard.
Yeah, I feel like she's equally as good in this film as well, even though, you know, she has moments, whereas De Niro has pretty much the whole film. I feel like the authenticity of the film stands up really well. I like that there's not music. I like that there's not necessarily violence to the same kind of degree that you might get in other Scorsese films like Mean Streets, Taxi Driver around this time. And then obviously what comes after that with De Niro and Scorsese especially. So yeah, I'm not going to necessarily give it a 10 because, you know, it's not like necessarily one of my like 10s, my favourites, but it's not far off. So I'm going to give this a 9 out of 10. Outstanding film.
Wow.
Ito, what did you think?
Yeah, so I mean, it's crazy. It's like I said. It's like I said. We have we've said nothing negative about this film at all, because I think it is rather flawless. Amazing acting throughout from everyone involved. Like you said, Smith, supporting cast are incredible as well. But it's a wonderful film because it is, especially in this day and age where we kind of love to break down and analyse mental health. I mean, this is one of those where it's just like, what a wonderful insight into the mind of someone that is delusional, maybe a danger to others, maybe a danger to themselves. The same with Sandra Bernhard as well. Her character is far more gone, but also at the same time, you know, you're looking for that humanity. And I don't know, man. It's just an incredible movie with such strong characters. Like even the most minor of characters on screen as well. Like Nige said, the lawyer guy. The lawyer has like 1 or 2 lines, and even he's like, "Oh, he's great." I'm like, "Who's that guy?" "I'm the lawyer." It's just it just stuff like that. "I'm Jerry's lawyer." The FBI, even the FBI guys, even though they're like very small roles, but they're great in it. But yeah, I mean, Robert De Niro carries this film without it ever looking like an effort. It's just an incredible performance. I'm like you, Smith. I'd give it a 10, but the only reason I won't give it a 10 is just that it's not one of my go-to movies. It's one I'd always recommend, but it's not next to those 10 movies for me. So yeah, I'm going to give it a 9 as well.
Nice. Nige, is there a twist?
So
don't.
He's going to give it a fucking 5.
So obviously I watched this film quite a long time ago, and I enjoyed it, and I watched it again. But obviously I watched it the first time, and then nothing really made me want to come back and watch it again. And I think it is very hard to put a reason. Like, we can sing its praises. Like, De Niro is spectacular in this film. Like, the way it's put together has that kind of raw, authentic New York feel. The fact it's kind of like a modern take on, well, what was then a modern take on sort of the pitfalls of celebritydom, or whatever you want to call it, like Jerry Lewis, and the crazy nature of autograph hunters and everything, which has obviously changed quite a lot in popular culture. But as easy to set up by holding butt up to the camera.
I couldn't resist those.
I think it's a very awkward film, which is both good and bad. It makes a little bit of an unpleasant viewing in some respects.
Yeah.
I don't think it's not really a drama, it's not really a comedy. It kind of fails to be both those things, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. But I didn't find it hilarious by any stretch of the imagination. The story is very simple, which kind of works to its benefit, but it can be a little bit frustrating, I would say, at points. So yeah, for me, I still think it's a great film. I think it's kind of a little bit described as like one of Scorsese's like lost masterpieces and the things like that. But for me, it's just a good film, a really good film that I probably won't go back and watch many other times. I didn't get on massively well with Joker. This is better than that, like this original source material. So for me, I'm going to give it 8 out of 10. Like, it is a really strong film, but it's just not. It's not one that if someone said, what are the sort of your favourite films or the greatest films of this era, it wouldn't be on the list for me. But I would still recommend people go and check it out. But Munch.
I was hoping you'd do another but.
Sometimes with these kind of films, you do feel like you have to give it like a really high rating, but yeah.
I think it's critically acclaimed, isn't it? And like, even at the time, it got nominated. I think he got nominated for Best Film for Cannes. It got nominated for a bunch of BAFTAs, and I think it only won for like Best Screenplay. But yeah, it was a commercial failure, and as I said, it had a detrimental effect on both Scorsese's health and his working relationship with De Niro. But judging on some of their more recent films, maybe that was a good thing, maybe not. Who knows?
What do you guys think of The King of Comedy? Get in touch. Email us on offradarpod.
Do you think it was a laughter riot or a terrifying fake gun stuck up your nose type situation?
Stuck up your bum. Email us on offradarpod@gmail.com. Tweet us.
Gmail.dong.
Gmail.tong. That's the new thing.
Gmail Pete Tong.
Tweet us at Offradar Podcast.
Offradar.
We're on YouTube, Facebook, everywhere. Come find us. We'll find you.
Us. We'll tie you up, and Smith will get down his lingerie and sit on your lap and go crazy on you.
Correct.